before I get into the full video, I need everyone on this video to go to my community page. Now, on the community page, my latest post is about a video that's happening next week. Next week is my birthday. I want to do a slightly different video where you guys ask me questions. A simple Q&A. And because there's a very small but very loyal audience, I need any of you that are watching this to go to the community page and put your questions under there. And if you don't have to ask one question, it could be a lot of questions. And it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be football. But let's get straight into the video. Welcome back to another YouTube video. Welcome back to the channel. And welcome back to West Ham Throwback Sagas. Now, a week ago, I talked about William Carvalho. That was last Friday. And 2 weeks ago, I talked about Marco Arnautovic. Today is about Manuel Pellegrini's reign at West Ham United. Now, if you do enjoy these videos, and just in general, make sure to like the video. And subscribe if you want to. We're trying to hit 500 before the end of the year. But on the 22nd of May, 2018, Manuel Pellegrini was appointed as West Ham United manager. Now, if you were like me, you was very positive about Manuel Pellegrini being hired because he was a Premier League winner. However, I was so out of the loop that I didn't even realise that he went to China in between, which would have been a red flag for me at the time if I had realised and done a little bit of research. But I was so out of the loop with football, just in general. I was just happy just to see the appointment. I was not like other people that were overly positive and thought we were going to get the Europa League in the first season, but we actually had a small chance of getting some form of European football in that first season. However, we weren't good enough that season. But to be fair, this was just after David Moyes' 6-month reign in his first spell at West Ham, from going from December to May. And apparently the Pellegrini deal was already agreed within December. So it was already pre-agreed. It was a bit like when actually Pellegrini was let go by Man City and Guardiola was agreed in advance. And we've seen what Pep has done since. Yeah, it was on a 3-year contract. And his first game was a 4-0 loss to Liverpool. Now, something I do want to go on to as well was the transfer window. Now, the transfer window is very important to talk about here. And the reason why it's so important to talk about is because of where are the players now within the squad that signed in the 18-19 season. And I'm just trying to get the transfer window up. Now, the players that came in that were first team was Issa Diop, who's now at Fulham. Issa Diop obviously was a very young player at the time, young and up-and-coming player. Even Jose Mourinho praised the signing after his masterclass against Manchester United that eventually, well, it didn't get Mourinho sacked, but it was one of the games that led to Mourinho sacking. Signed from Toulouse. Issa Diop was an honest day player. A very honest day player. He was never really consistent, and he had to leave eventually, and he did. Lucas Fabianski, who's still here and has overall been great for West Ham. He may make the odd mistake, but it was very like an odd mistake. But Fabianski is now West Ham's second choice keeper, unless Lopetegui wants to change that. Ryan Fredericks, awful right back. Imagine if this guy didn't have pace. If this guy didn't have pace. The guy is an awful footballer. Couldn't pass, couldn't cross. Like, it wasn't even a great dribbler, it was just pace. That is it. It was literally just pace. Never saw the hype, never got him. I was very happy that he left. But he was we signed him on a free and we let him go on a free. I'm not exactly too bothered. Jack Wilshere wasn't great. Most of the time just sat in the washing machine and scared Declan Rice. That was his biggest highlight. West Ham didn't really do fuck all. Andrew Yarmolenko had a good first season. Scored a goal against Chelsea to keep us up in the relegation in the 1920 season, which we will get onto in this video. And didn't really do anything since until the game where he came back from his break after the Ukraine war situation, scored against Aston Villa and Sevilla. It was weird because even under the worst circumstances, it actually got the better out of him in terms of just being a footballer. Fabian Balbuena, I didn't really like Balbuena, but I've seen worse players at West Ham when I look back. Like, I actually think he was better than Jose Font at West Ham, but I don't think Balbuena was great. It wasn't the worst, though. I was probably a bit harsh on him at the time, but he wasn't great. It wasn't bad first season either, but we actually suffered quite a bit defensively, just in general. And that's why Moyes was such a revelation in the first place after taking over from Manuel Pellegrini at the time. We signed him from Corinthians on an undisclosed fee, and then he eventually left on a free in the 2021 season, I'm pretty sure. He left in 2021, and then we replaced him with Craig Dawson. Now, I'm not the biggest Craig Dawson fan as much as everyone else is, but Dawson was definitely an upgrade on Balbuena. Felipe Anderson, probably one of the bigger flops at West Ham. I want to say he's like top 5 biggest transfers that we had at the club. Probably the best announcement maybe we've had at the club. I would actually say the Mohamed Kudus announcement for me tops it with Governor Beaver from last year. But the Felipe announcement, the transfer announcement, if you guys know, that was one of the best. Obviously, Felipe Anderson was like always a player that was highly talked of, but I never really watched him at Lazio. But I was happy with the signing. I just knew he was some form of wonder kid. Was very lazy, unfortunately. And he didn't really have a gigantic like set of skills that could make up for the fact that of him being lazy off the ball. He had a lot of natural ability that we never really get to see because the guy just wanted to do his own thing half the time. I rated him first season, and after that I was just like, no. Lucas Perez, for some reason, signed for West Ham for 4 million. He was actually not a bad finisher, but it was just very like, we're signing him, but are we actually going to use him properly? Are we actually going to use him consistently? One of the most forgotten footballers. I don't even remember what season he left. I'm pretty sure he's only here for literally one season. Wasn't great. One of the former West Ham and Arsenal players, there's a lot of former West Ham Arsenal players, and Lucas Perez is probably the weirdest one. Carlos Sanchez, probably the worst one on this list. The worst player I've seen at West Ham, probably. Him, Roger Johnson, and a guy we'll get on to later called Roberto. Them three are the worst players I've ever seen at the club in my lifetime. And we signed him from Fiorentina, ironically, on an undisclosed fee, and then he went to Watford after us. But yeah, what a terrible player. He was terrible at Aston Villa. I don't know why we got him. Samir Nasri was the last signing, and we made that as a free agent in 31st of December 2018. Didn't really do fuck all for the club either. He just got an assist for Declan Rice against Arsenal, and that was the only thing he did, really. The players that we let go, we let Patrice Evra and James Collins go as a free agents, and Crystal Palace, we let Kuyate go to Crystal Palace as well for 9.5 million. Now, in this 18-19 season, West Ham were looking on the up. New football, big name, etc. And I think this is the reason why he was hired, was mainly because he was a big name. And it's David Sullivan we're talking about here. So he was always going to hire him for those reasons. And listen, like, I didn't used to watch preseason games then. I do now, because I'm like actually more invested ever since lockdown. Like, I've always loved football, but moving to the London, that period from moving to the London Stadium from 2016 to 2018, no, from 2016 to 2020, I was out of the loop because I was still keeping an eye on it. But it killed my love for football, the fact that we left that stadium. Like, genuinely, it killed me. Like, I got so bored of it. So I was out of the loop pretty much. But I didn't watch any preseason games to keep up with the 18-19 season of what Pellegrini was doing. Ironically, and the reason why I'm going to go ironically is something I'm going to talk about later. His first win with the club came in an EFL Cup match against AFC Wimbledon. This was also around the time where Declan Rice was coming through. He didn't play the first 3 games. He asked to go out on loan, and Pellegrini was like, "You're definitely not going out on loan." And then you saw how good Declan Rice was that season for his first season. Obviously, we lost 4 games in a row, and it was looking like a Frank de Boer situation. But the first win was against Everton, and that game was where Declan Rice came to life. People like Obiang, people like Arnautovic. That Yarmolenko goal was amazing. That was the game where West Ham really came alive under Pellegrini as well. And the problems was with Pellegrini is that he didn't care about the cups as well as the league. So we literally talked about Wimbledon beating Wimbledon in the EFL Cup match. They beat us in the FA Cup. And it was actually funny because Wimbledon ended up getting Millwall in the next round from what I remember, if memory serves me right. So we could have had a West Ham Millwall match in the FA Cup. But Pellegrini decided to completely fuck it up against Wimbledon. And so did the players. Like, we had a lot of players that didn't want to be there either, to be completely real with you. Basically a 4-1-4-1 formation. Most of the time it was like a 4-3-3, but sometimes a 4-1-4-1. Mark Noble didn't have a bad season. I thought Declan Rice was great. Obiang kind of seemed to struggle under Pellegrini a little bit. He ended up leaving next season. The young Yarmolenko and Anderson thing was working. Zabaleta and Ryan Fredericks as the right back options wasn't great. Aaron Cresswell and Masuaku as the left back options wasn't great either. We had a lot of issues in defence. Fabianski had a great season and stuff like that as well. And we finished 10th. And it was our first top 10 finish since the 15-16 season, which is not an achievement, but it was just like, we're there sort of thing. Like, it was very average mid-table season, but it was also the manager's first season, so you can't really like look much into that. Now, there wasn't really many problems with the manager like within the first season, and everything was fine. And I think more fans were actually looking on the up more than the down. And it didn't help when in 2019 we broke our transfer record again from Felipe Anderson to Sebastian Haller for 45 million in 2019. And now in this 1920 season in the transfer window, West Ham spent 155 million, but don't let that fool you guys. The reason why I say don't let that fool you, I remember the exact situation where, as you guys know, when we signed Sebastian Haller, he was playing up front with Luka Jovic, I'm pretty sure, with Frankfurt. Now, who works in the front two really well? Javier Hernandez. Now, the problem was then was the fact that we sold Hernandez after the transfer window. Tactically, I'm pretty sure to the MLS, to LA Galaxy, I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure we did that on purpose, just so we could get a replacement in. That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the utmost truth with that. And not many people talk about that enough with the scummy things that this ownership does, but it completely fucked it because Sebastian Haller was scoring at times, but he was scoring when he got service. But he didn't get much service under either manager that he played for at West Ham. So within this 1920 season transfer window, we signed 2 goalkeepers, David Martin and Roberto, who we'll come on to later on both of them. Signed Pablo Fornals. Pablo Fornals was a successful signing at West Ham, but it was just, in my opinion, heavily overrated in a wider scale of the fan base. It was definitely a success, though. Obviously, Sebastian Haller, as we talked about. We signed Albion Ajeti, if you guys remember him. Albion Ajeti, a very pointless striker. But also, I guess he wasn't given a chance, really, but I didn't really see anything in him in terms of qualities, if I'm being completely honest. But if we're talking about first team signings, 2 of them were goalkeepers. Fornals and Haller were first team. Goncalo Cardoso, we signed from Boa Vista, he never played. Albion Ajeti signed as well. And we made 3 signings in January, re-signing Darren Randolph, Jared Bowen and Thomas Souček, who have technically been successful. I'm not going to... I much I don't like Souček. As a player, he hasn't been a flop at all. And neither has Jared Bowen. Jared Bowen has been one of the biggest successes. Well, probably the best transfer I've seen at West Ham so far in my lifetime. In terms of worth for money as well, we got it for 22 million. That's a fucking steal and a half. Jesus Christ. If we actually wanted to sell him and reinvest, we could triple that. But only to the first team, like throughout like the summer transfer window, it was only Fornals and Haller into the outfield players. Now, here's where things got tricky, guys. In the 1920 season, at some point in the season, I can't remember, I think it was like October time. What was it? Fabianski got injured around the September, October time. It doesn't say when on this Wikipedia, but the problem is that Fabianski was the keeper. He just came back off a Hammer of the Year type season. I'm pretty sure he won Hammer of the Year. And I'm pretty sure he made like 100 saves or some shit like that in the season. It didn't help the fact that we had an open, wide defence. But at the same time, it didn't really matter if your goalkeeper's keeping you in so many games. Like, it's ridiculous. He was ridiculous that season, but he got injured. And that was just our luck. Now, the problem was with this 1920 season under Manuel Pellegrini as well is that, yes, he wasn't backed. He wasn't backed. I can comfortably say that he wasn't backed. But there was more to get out of the squad, in my opinion. It wasn't a great squad, but there was more to get out of the squad than being in a relegation battle. Unfortunately, that's where we found ourselves. We found ourselves in a relegation battle. And in the first Premier League game of the season, once again, we faced a Big Six team, and once again, we got battered by his former team in our own ground. These are the times where, like, Saga and Sterling and Aguero were having their way with us. They, year in, year out. Saga, Sterling, Aguero. One of the most annoying trios I've ever seen us play against. And we lost 5-0 at home. I think I remember playing FPL and having, I think, Declan Rice in that team or something. I think one of my friends had Declan Rice in their team against Manchester City. I was like, I don't think you know how to play FPL. But in September 2019, I'll keep this in mind, we lost 4-2 to AFC Wimbledon in the same year. This is where I turned. Now, people are going to say they turned around probably maybe the Palace at home game, or the Newcastle at home game, or the Tottenham at home game, or the Burnley away game, the Wolves away game, etc. For me, it was Oxford United, where we lost 4-0 in the EFL Cup, where again, Carlos Sanchez had a howler. I'm pretty sure Masuaku had a howler as well. But even we were actually on a good run of form at the time, beating Manchester United and beating Norwich at home, etc. Like, you remember that Aaron Cresswell free kick against Manchester United. But because of the cups, and I wasn't a man who looked at the Carabao Cup as anything, and not even in terms of an arrogant thing from West Ham perspective, because we never won anything, but just from a perspective as I wanted to take cup serious, but the Carabao Cup wouldn't hurt as much as the FA Cup. But the fact that we got beat 4-0 by Oxford, that's when it turned for me. That's when I was like, nah, this manager's fucked. And I was so happy when he left. And I was so disappointed when David Moyes came in. But then I was proven wrong by David Moyes. But I've also talked about David Moyes' time at West Ham from the start to finish. You can go check that out. And the reason why I haven't talked about the Arnautovic situation is because that was the video I did 2 weeks ago. Go and check that out. But he was sacked in December 2019, on the 28th of December 2019, after a 2-1 home loss to Leicester City, where both teams played their second teams. But their second team was miles better than ours. And the problem is that there was no organisation in the defence. There was no cohesiveness in the attack. There was no structure within the midfield. We had a goalkeeping crisis. And in one of those games where there was a goalkeeping crisis showed in that Burnley away game. Now, Roberto, I might do a whole video of Roberto if it's worth doing a video on, or I might just get it all out now. But Roberto Jimenez played instead of David Martin as the backup to Fabianski, because David Martin was originally signed to be a third-choice keeper, training ground keeper. Son of Alvin Martin, who's a West Ham icon, and David Martin's a West Ham fan. Obviously, he used to play for Millwall, funny enough. I think he's quite liked at MK Dons as well, I'm not too sure. But He came in because Roberto had an absolute stinker, like nearly game in game out. There was actually a couple games where he made a couple really good saves, and then he would still make mistakes in that same game that we're talking about. But Roberto would drop the ball no matter what it takes, and especially in that, if you go and watch that Burnley 3-0 2019 highlights, it was awful around. Balbuena was awful. Like, I remember some of the goals. Like, I don't know why it's always Burnley that dunk on us like that, but it just always seems to be them. And that was one of the games where Roberto literally flapped it. And then David Martin came in, and we beat Chelsea at their ground. Now, we never beat Chelsea at their ground. We never beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. They never really beat us nowadays in our ground either. And as you see from last season, we both beat each other again at home. Now, with that Chelsea game, I was thinking, this is the nail in the coffin. This is where we get beat by Frank Lampard's Chelsea. And we finally get to see Pellegrini's nail in the coffin. But no, all of a sudden we actually want to play well this game. And it ends up delaying Pellegrini's sacking by about 4 or 5 games. Something like that. That was a problem because, like, even though I was very happy to beat Chelsea, I didn't celebrate it because I wanted Pellegrini gone. I wanted to celebrate the loss, but I would have been like, at least this is the dagger in the coffin where we can move on and, you know, get out of this relegation battle. But I didn't even get to really enjoy that Chelsea away win because I wasn't really too much of a believer within the whole reign at the time. But that was a problem, and the Leicester City game was the dagger. And David Martin had a great game in that Chelsea game. He had a masterclass. He was the reason why we stayed alive in that game. Declan Rice bossed the midfield that game, don't get me wrong, and other players did their jobs well. Obviously, Aaron Cresswell scored with his right foot. He cut in to score with his right foot, and that is mad. But David Martin was the reason why we well and truly won that game. Like, we could have been beaten like 3 or 4-1, but we got kept in the game. And he was eventually sacked. Now, the football was also putrid. And when I mean putrid, I mean putrid. But for a different reason to why a David Moyes football or Sam Allardyce football would be bad, for very obvious reasons. Pellegrini played possession-based football. But it wasn't possession-based football as it's Pep, even though sometimes people comment about Pep and Arteta's football as slow sometimes and sideways, etc. I still think their football is a lot more intricate and a lot more interesting to watch than it was watching a Pellegrini football. It was more towards the same sort of football where Arsene Wenger was playing right at the end of Arsenal, where he was making Arsenal play sideways a lot. I always used to call Pellegrini's football BTEC Arsene Wenger football, where it was slow and sideways and no openings. The difference was that Arsenal had a Cazorla and Wenger wasn't stupid. Even though Arsene Wenger did deserve to go in the end for Arsenal, like, he was at least like an actual great manager where he could get the best out of players. Pellegrini couldn't get the best out of what he had. Funny enough, he's actually at Betis reunited with Fornals and Adrian. But it was just very bad to watch for those reasons. When we had the ball, we were shit with the ball. It wasn't good possession-based football. That's why a lot of fans look at, but possession-based football has never worked at West Ham, because they only refer to Pellegrini. That's how bad their football was. It makes people have short-term memory loss about, we should never play possession-based football because it didn't work 4 or 5 years ago, which is fucking stupid, by the way. Which is the most stupid thing that a football fan could fucking say. Because just because it didn't work then doesn't mean it doesn't work now. How the football has never ever worked like that. But I'm not going to get into that. But that's why people were like, let's just keep Moyes. Because they were happy with getting beaten 5-6-0 because we didn't have the ball. Like, doesn't make any sense in my opinion. Oh yeah, we lost 6-0, but it's not his fault. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that again. I had to deal with a whole, 18 months to 2 years for that. But he ended up getting sacked for David Moyes, and the thing is with Pellegrini, he was only signed as a big name. He was signed to appease the fans. He's complained about working with the ownership since, not having his own director of football to really work with. I think it was the director of football he actually worked with at West Ham wasn't his ideal sort of director of football. He can't have been that good if he brought fucking Sanchez in and Ajeti and all these bum players. But Pellegrini didn't help himself by approving all of these decisions and letting himself be a yes man to the ownership. And what I mean by yes man, like the term yes man probably gets overdone nowadays, but what I mean is just letting everything happen. Letting yourself get disgruntled and dehumanized by the situation, almost. But as much as it was a 10th place finish within the first season, the second season was disastrous. Ironically, I'm actually wearing a 1920 kit, but I didn't do that on purpose. But that is the Pellegrini reign at West Ham United. I don't think this video was going to be that long, but it is what it is. Make sure to leave a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're new. Social medias are in the description if you want to follow me. The email for the inquiries. We're trying to hit 500 subscribers before the end of the year. So if you can make that happen, that'll be great. Go to the community page and put a Q&A question in for my birthday Q&A. That'll be happening in 6 days. And I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.